Hello, listeners, and welcome to a Geek Tragedy. I am Stephen, known online as Plague Mantle for various reasons, and I am your host. As ever, I would like to welcome to the pod the most erudite human and my bestest friend in the whole wide world, Holly Properly. Hello, Holly. How are you?
Hello, bloody warm.
Is that it? Just bloody warm?
Pretty much. Yep. I'm British, so warm takes precedence over all other emotions in the summer.
Oh, okay, fair enough. I'm quite cool, but
You have fans.
there's this aircon thing going on. There's fans.
And your neurodivergence isn't making you wear 84 layers.
It's true.
I was going to say, you look like you're wearing a fleece, Holly.
I am wearing a fleece. I don't want to wear
Feels
a fleece.
somewhat counterproductive.
I can't not wear this fleece.
And that other voice you can hear is our very own salvaged man and crafter par excellence, Mark Caldery. Hello, Mark. How are you?
Hi. I'm very well, thank you very much. It is still quite sunny and warm and hot in Cornwall, and I'm loving it. More hammockage has been attained over the past couple of days.
I'm loving your shirt.
Thank you very much. I felt let's go for a bit of summery goodness going on.
Yeah,
Reflect what's going on outside.
In our own little chat, listeners, Mark was sending us pictures of his feet in the river nearby the other day when it was nice and hot.
I went paddling.
Did a bit of a paddling. That was lovely.
Yeah. Anyway, enough about me. What about you, Plagway Mantel?
Yeah, I'm all right. It's been a bit of a warm day, like for everyone else and stuff, whatever, malarkey and so forth. But yeah, we're doing all right. It's been nice. My cats are basically just jelly. But other than that, everyone at the house is okay. Particularly Sixpence. He's not liking it for some reason. He's just doing his best impression of the longest boy stretched out as far as he can be.
It's not whether for fur coats or indeed fleeces, Holly.
Yeah. Well, you see, actually, what I'm doing this isn't an autism thing at all. No, not at all. I'm wearing this fleece in solidarity with Sully, the world's fluffiest cat, who is currently lying on the sofa about 2 feet away from the specific cooling mat that I bought him for this very purpose.
His brother is doing the same thing.
Yeah, I can put him on it, and he'll put his paws on it, and then he'll look at me, and then he'll just collapse, sort of go sploot to one side and land entirely off the cooling mat. So, because he's a contrary bastard.
And finally, of course, we'd like to welcome and say hello to our producer and long-suffering behind-the-scenes Kit, who is...
Best Kit.
Airfix Kit.
He's somewhere out there, possibly sleeping at this point, who knows. I mean, I would be in his situation, but, I've got to do a pod. So it's been a whole slew of Fantasy Forest pods with a slight break, but we're keen to pick up where we left off. We had a bit of a chat about what we wanted to do next, and if you've been listening to this pod at all, you'll know we will randomly wander off in whatever direction we feel like. But apocalyptic, post-apocalyptic, dystopian, cyberpunk, there are a lot of sci-fi subsections that share a part of themselves in that great Venn diagram. And as ever with the pod, particularly its eclectic cast, we tend to pluck our thoughts from the bush of random ideas like unripened gooseberries. So let's see what kind of creamy dessert we can add our idlings to as we tuck into this pod's topic. The beginning of post-apocalyptica, yay, and onwards, which, seeing as this involves literary knowledge, begins with the battle cry, if you want something done, Holly, properly. So tell us about the godmother of post-apocalyptica and the first big works of that genre, Holly.
With pleasure.
That was lovely. Moving on.
Thanks. Thank you so much. So I think kind of the place to start with this is that the godmother of or the mother of science fiction and the mother of the godmother of the post-apocalyptic genre are the same person. It is Mary Shelley, who everybody knows as the author of Frankenstein, which is widely considered to be the first science fiction novel and to have introduced science fiction as a genre to literature, which is incredible. What a lot of people don't know is that she is also considered to be one of the founding creators of post-apocalyptica as a genre. In 1826, The Last Man was published, and that is a Mary Shelley novel which deals with a plague that has wiped out the majority of humanity.
Plague?
And plague.
A
And
mantle plague.
not a... Oh, no.
And by the way, I believe it's Frankenstein. Anyway, carry on.
Thank you so much.
Well,
for
Mark's
that.
not going to say anything for a while, so he's got to get in there.
I will refer to it solely as Frankenstein from now on, and yeah. Actually, I won't. I don't think I can bring myself to. I'm terribly sorry.
So can you summarize for us, Holly?
Yeah. So the Last Man is a novel that deals with a plague that has spread and has wiped out the majority of humanity. And essentially, we follow the characters that we follow are characters trying to survive in this new style of world. And ultimately, and I think considering the fact that this was written in 1826, the statute of spoilers has run out on this one. So essentially you are left with the patriarch of that family being the last man alive. And we see that actually quite a lot. We see that in the film version of The Mist, as an example. Family groups and the ties that family groups have, and then one person being left as like that kind of that survivor at the end. And the reason that The Last Man is considered to be kind of the one of the kind of the guiding beacons of the post-apocalyptic genre is because this man is then left as the last human, at least as far as he's aware. And it deals very much at the time of writing. There are two things that really kind of define Mary Shelley in her work as the mother of science fiction and the godmother to post-apocalyptica, which both fit into that Venn diagram that you were talking about earlier. Mm-hmm. Post-apocalyptic writing is generally tends to be a branch of science fiction in one way or another, quite often because you're dealing with like science fiction tropes quite a lot of the time.
People consider The Last Man to be dystopian as well, to be honest.
They do. They absolutely do. I don't think they're right in this instance. I think it is. I think we can take plagues to be an apocalyptic event, and I would consider it to be to be post-apocalyptic. But at that point in time when Mary Shelley was writing, the concept of lastness, which is something that's really difficult to say without a glottal stop, was huge. It was really prevalent, and it's the idea of being, as it obviously sounds, being the last of something, being the last of humanity, being the last of your family, being the last of a lineage. That was very, very prevalent as a literary concept because so many people died so young. You often found that you could be one of 5 or 6 children, and then within a few years you were the last of those children. So that concept of lastness was something that was explored a lot within literary genres.
And that particular Shelley's stuff was considered quite horrible. The people at the time critiqued it awfully and they hated it, and she was really taken aback by it would remain one of her favourite pieces of work, but yeah, she was really taken aback by how negatively it was received because people found it to be too bitter and too dark and horrible. But I mean, obviously later on, when it was re-critiqued, a century later, it was loved and adored. But
it was largely the same with Frankenstein. When she brought out Frankenstein, publishers wouldn't touch it. She was just lucky. So for context, I mean, her mother was Mary Wollstonecraft. So her mother was somebody who was instrumental in gaining, basically kind of in starting to gain that equity for women. And she was an academic, and she wrote a lot about sort of, equity and equality, and a lot of a lot of Mary Shelley's work was a reflection of her mother's drive and passion for equality. You see that in Frankenstein, that whole sense of otherness, which was again really big at the time, which kind of, you know, that sort of whole feeling of being outside of that society, where society is so important, and understanding like the teeny tiny rules and all of the things that go on in society, and feeling like you're an outsider from that, which is something that Mary Shelley felt a lot, because she ran away with Percy Shelley when she was still a teenager. She was 15 or 14 or 15 years old when she ran away from home and married Percy Shelley and followed him around on foot through most of Europe until.
Well, but I'm surprised that you've flown after him.
Well, yeah, until, well, no, but I mean, like, you know, he was doing that whole tragic poet thing at the time and hanging out with Byron, and one of the reasons why her work is so dark is because so many of the people around her, including her own children, including her family, they all died really young. She knew a lot of people with, you know, horrible deformities and diseases. Yeah.
It was all cool. It was known as the climate of grief. That was, you know, the period that people lived in. It was a standard everyday thing that was, everyone was grieving, and it was terrible.
Yeah.
And, you know, people would go out and write poetry about it, because how else are you supposed to fucking express yourself? There weren't any therapists or counselors.
And this is why I think bibliotherapy is incredibly important. As a practice, the idea of reading books that cover, even in fiction, that cover topics that mean something to you is an excellent way of kind of processing grief and trauma. And reading things like Frankenstein, if you're somebody that struggles with the idea of, you know, like being involved in society as a whole, is actually quite a therapeutic process. There's a whole kind of movement dedicated to that.
I was about to say we should like bring Mark in on this, but it would be inappropriate this time, because I'd be then likening him to Frankenstein. I would be at least the monster, and I would feel quite bad at that point.
I think, you know,
Mark, and the horse you rode in on.
Mark's definitely more of like the creator. You know, like I've seen the
myself
puppets.
more. I see myself more as Frankenstein rather than his creation. Yes.
I was just going to say, like, we should probably mark on this, because like we're chatting away about it. I mean, obviously,
that's fascinating.
It was considered to be a second big work of science fiction, which ties us in nicely, because obviously Frankenstein was the first and The Last Man was the second. And we're talking about how these things fall into that Venn diagram. But if it was the first big post-apoc thing, right? We were talking before the pod, and I said, you know, it was disease that wiped out the world as we know it, and dealt with the Last Man Standing kind of story, and that plague and Last Man Standing stories have kind of dominated a lot of post-apoc work down the years. And you immediately said, if you remember what you said, Mark, the book that jumped to mind.
No,
I said I Am Legend, I think, and you said. I forgot what you said.
Yeah. Good lead-in. I'm glad we're both prepped for that one.
No. It was Stephen said I Am Legend, and you said
the
Omega Man. Yeah.
And then we talked about the move through literature again, because I Am Legend obviously was a vampire story effectively, but the vampires. Am I allowed to?
But it was a plague. Yeah, but it was a plague which created the vampirism. So the whole world was overtaken by this, and he was, again, this whole thing that you were saying, Holly, of the lastness, that he was the last man. And there are a number of you can look at Mad Max as being the last man. He's very much solo. You know, it's a single person working their way through an apocalyptic or post-apocalyptic. Why is it so difficult to say?
I don't know. When we were at Fantasy
It's a
Forest,
lot of glottals, isn't it?
It's a lot of plosive consonants. That's what it is.
I couldn't say it in my ridiculous accent.
At Fantasy Forest, there were a lot of people coming up to us and they were like, "What do we call you?" And I was like, "Well, we're the wastes, we're the post-apocalyptic people, and they were like, yeah, but I can't go around saying you have to go and see the post-apocalyptic, and like, there were so many people that couldn't say it. I was like, this is actually a really difficult word to say. That's the end of that anecdote.
Yeah, it's remarkably difficult to say, but yeah, that, as you say, that theme runs through so many things. It's one person on their own surviving through a landscape which has become totally inhospitable to them.
And I think that's actually where it differs from where the biggest break between post-apocalyptica and post-apocalyptic
Dystopian?
no and things like kind of more traditional like fantasy and science fiction where it deviates the most from that is because if you look at things again, I'm going to cite Lord of the Rings. Like in Lord of the Rings, the entire premise is companionship and community and how you build that up through your travel. It starts as Frodo as one person and immediately has Sam, and then he gains more people the longer he goes on, and it's all about building that community. In post-apocalyptic settings, pretty much in post-apocalyptic settings, you often start with like 4 or 5 people, and then they very quickly all get killed off, or they disappear, or they turn out to be traitors or whatever, and then you're left with that final man standing. And it does have that kind of that isolation as motive.
And there's a process of reduction as well. That everything is being reduced down to the single protagonist. Ooh, get us.
Well, and just to kind of go along with the whole Last Man sort of storytelling and the originality, but as we touched on just now, the concept that plague or sickness, illness, etc., is the causality behind that is very strong, and it's, I think, as we were saying before, the reasons that has kind of stayed in the stories, this idea of loneliness and emptiness and abandonment, that goes hand in hand with plague, because it's killing everyone off. It's not like the bomb that gets dropped on you and everyone dies kind of almost immediately. It's this slow progressive,
and it's something that no matter what humanity does, they cannot control. We've seen it throughout history. You know, bubonic plague, Spanish flu, COVID. You cannot control disease.
You think of COVID, and it was an isolating experience because everybody had, theoretically had to isolate from each other. So that became a very reductive process in terms of society. We're
still feeling that, right?
Yeah, and there was no loo roll.
Well, there was if you were going to the stores and you needed anything. Reference to a meme that I might have been involved in unwittingly.
I love the fact that one of the best things that came out of COVID was that you became a meme.
No, but Mark's right.
Yeah.
COVID's a really good example, right, of how many people died and we were losing. And I don't know how many people thought, when's this going to end? Is there an end in sight? Is it going to get worse? Whatever. But I'm certain that there were people out there that felt like it was going to be the end of the world, as they knew it. And when we were in lockdown and we were stuck in our rooms, and I mean, it was for I guess about 9 months in total, was it?
I know that I was on my own in my flat for 143 days.
Oof.
Yeah, I mean, we did come and see you.
No, this was the second big lockdown. I was on my own
over Christmas.
Yeah, I was on my own for 143 days.
That's not entirely true. I made it over on Christmas.
You did, yeah.
I bought a stuffed cauliflower.
You did bring a stuffed
cauliflower. Was that when you got serenaded outside your
No, that was my 30th birthday. My 30th birthday was 2 months into the first lockdown, so everything kicked off in March, and my 30th birthday was in
It kicked
June.
off on my birthday.
It did kick off on your birthday, yeah.
Hence your term plague mantle.
Yes, I had that term since the mid-noughties, just specifically for the coming of COVID.
I knew you were a time traveller.
I am. I'm doing it right now. See? But yeah, it's changed. The world has changed because of COVID. Things are different now. Things have... People, particularly, in our brain pans, a lot of people are finding it more difficult to kind of come out of their houses again and do stuff. They were for a long time after lockdown. I still think it's a factor in how clubs and things closed down during COVID, didn't reopen, and there's not as many places to go, and that kind of stuff happened.
Yeah.
There was also, I mean, this is just a thought I've had now, but there was also kind of a resetting of society in many senses, which is the whole post-apocalyptic thing is a resetting, and I think that's a thing which fascinates a lot of people who may be dissatisfied with the way society is and the lives they're leading, is that it's this big reset. And we kind of got a taste of that in some sense during the pandemic.
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stories that work its way through, like, you know, the concepts of plague, right? And everything we've just said. I wonder how many times now I'm going to sit and read, you know, the Scarlet Plague or whatever, and think of this conversation, and see how many parallels I can draw, saying the Scarlet Plague, between Jack London's experience of his time when there were plagues knocking around all over the place, and what we went through. You know, how that's going to be reflected. Because I hadn't thought about that until we've literally just had this conversation, and about how much more. I mean, like, so when Shelley wrote The Last Man, there was a lot of, in the way that's written, if you have read it, there's a lot of not kind of anger, but just science. Medicine was too slow; it couldn't keep up with the plague, right?
Yeah.
And that, I think that upset a lot of people in that it gave them a lot of fear in the idea that if that happened, everyone would die because there was no actual medicine. But again, so when these stories were written back in the 1800s and early 1900s, our medicine was pretty pants, you know, comparatively to now. So there must have been a greater level of fear, you know, just absolute terror whenever sickness kicked off.
Well,
and people writing about it then, very different now, right?
Potentially, but at the same time, the level of understanding of like how things spread, how they mutated, like was a lot less. So the general public actually like probably knew less, like had less to be worried about because they knew less.
That's why writers just engendered that fear in them.
And then Mary Shelley comes along with her, you know, like with her education and sort of spoils things for everybody.
Yeah, education every single bloody time. People coming along with educated ideas and spoiling all the fun for everyone.
Bringing fear into everything. So yeah, I mean, we're not going into huge depth here, but like, I mean, The Stand was one I wanted to mention because obviously that'll make Holly happy briefly to mention The Stand. Why is The Stand good, Holly?
The Stand,
or Mark. I mean, you both very like Stephen King for some reason.
because he's an exceptional author.
Yes, he is.
The Stand actually, I think, is probably my favorite post-apocalyptic book. Largely because it's one of the only ones that I've kind of read that is definitively post-apocalyptic, as opposed to dystopian. And also because it's written by Stephen King, and also because it's just really good. And it has that sense of lastness, but in a very Stephen King kind of characterization way. There's a lot of kind of almost fantastical subtext that's just rolling on.
There's a lot of religious subtext in it. It's good versus evil, and also you've got the plague in Captain Trips. So you know it's your classic mechanism for creating the apocalypse, but he weaves in this whole almost biblical subtext into it. It's not even a subtext, really, is it? It's right up front, and the whole story is
obvious. But no, it's brilliant. It's one of my favorite Stephen King books for sure. To a point where I was like, I really wanted to cosplay Flag at one point, but I couldn't find a wolf. So the only kind of semi kind of wolfish creature I had access to was a dachshund, and that just kind of ruined the whole look. So do that.
Less imposing.
Yeah, it wasn't
Dennis would be sad to hear you say that.
It was Dudley. It was.
Well, no, but Dennis would be sad to hear you say that.
Dennis is not very imposing. He's very short.
He's a dachshund.
He is a dachshund, but he's a big.
Striking fear at ankle level.
More like he's a standard dachshund, so more calf. an ankle.
Okay.
But
Shin level.
So,
yeah.
moving on. Just to finish off that point. And eventually nowadays it's led to the kind of inclusion of zombies in all of the post-apocalyptic stuff because they're always part of a plague in some way, right? I don't really dwell on zombies, just kind of want to point to the fact that that was the natural evolution of where it all went because trying to survive in a post-apocalyptic nightmare wasn't hard enough. You just had to throw in zombies as well.
I like zombies. Zombies are great.
There's
Well, they are, but they're a bit done to death. But yeah,
Oh yeah, but they're still great. All right, fine. Don't like zombies.
I'm
can.
not a massive fan of zombies because I had a really bad experience when I was very small.
this is gonna be weird.
No, it's not. I was at my my dad's house for the weekend, and it was back when I was very small. I was like 4, maybe 5, maybe younger. And it was when he still smoked, and he'd gone in the garden for a cigarette, and the thing that I was watching on TV finished, and Michael Jackson's Thriller started. And I was very small, and I was very scared. I was so scared of all the zombies and the werewolves and the changing and the things. I was so scared that I couldn't find the remote. I couldn't go up to the TV to turn the TV off because I felt like they were going to like reach out and grab me, and I had to sidle with my back against the wall all the way out of the living room through the dining room,
like you were dancing in the
through the kitchen.
Did you moon dance
to get my dad? I did not, and I have hated everything to do with Michael Jackson ever since that moment. But also zombies. I just they terrify me. Really scared of zombies.
I don't dislike zombies. I've just seen a lot of zombie films. I mean, like some of my favorite games are things like Left 4 Dead. If you've played Left 4 Dead, that's a great game, right? Left 4 Dead, not Left 4 Dead 2 so much, but Left 4 Dead 1, great game, brilliant zombie game. And I really enjoyed reading stuff like The Walking Dead and the first couple of seasons of The Walking Dead. I thought that was quite good. But it's just everywhere for like all of the teens. They call the teens. We call them the teens.
What, the 20 teens?
Yeah.
I think so. I don't really know anymore because
I'm not
technically
enough to know.
Technically we're in the 20s, but the 20s is reserved entirely for flapper dresses and Jeeves and Worcester. So
it's true.
I don't know anymore.
Not post-apocalyptica.
No.
Anyway, yeah. So I do like zombies, but yeah, overdone. I mean, like stuff like ghouls in Fallout. They're better.
Yeah, that's you see. I can deal with that.
I know we've got Holly playing Fallout.
Yeah.
Which one?
3.
3. Excellent. Yeah. Good start.
Yeah, I have started.
Very proud. Very proud. So, I think we're going to move into. At the beginning, I said post-apocalyptica, but also apocalyptica, and also dystopia, etc. And we slogged our way from the beginnings of the PA impact / dystopian impact on the world in the 1820s. And obviously there was a lot of art and literature around the early 1900s, which I'd love to talk about, but I don't know enough about it. Mark might know more about it, but there was a lot of really beautiful bits of artwork that came out around that time and after the Great War that were really kind of vividly powerful. I don't know enough about talking about art to really kind of give it any purpose, but might be worth doing for next time. I'll point at some pieces and you can tell me why they're good. Other than me going, look at that, good. But in there were lots of bits of literature about post-apocalyptica, but most
of them like amazing stories and stuff like that. The pulp fiction publications.
No, I mean, like if you go back far enough, like before any of this, the first apocalypse story was I've got it over here, Theologus Autodidactus, which is by Ibn al-Nafis, and in the 13th century, and it was about an impact event in the world which caused an apocalypse, which wipes out the world, for example. Stuff like that. I didn't know until I started researching this episode. Anyway, but the actual big man of the late 1800s was H.G. Wells, and obviously he wrote The Time Machine, and our wandering time traveller witnesses the end of the world, and the apocalypse is the sun collapsing, and lives very briefly amongst the Morlocks who try to eat him, because they're carnivores. Well, they're already carnivores because they eat people, and they're not really people. with their glowing red eyes.
That makes them...
Cannibalistic humanoid underground dwellers,
Yeah.
chuds.
There you go.
Another
True
movie
that.
reference.
And obviously, he kind of really wanted to talk about the apocalypse because he went out and went one step further 3 years later and wrote War of the Worlds. And it kind of always felt to me like he wanted to get to post-apoc, but he never really got there. He kind of kept destroying the world, but he never got to that bit where people lived in the aftermath of it.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, we touched on War of the Worlds before. The idea that the machines did so much damage and left the world kind of died. What were you going to say? Go on.
Oh, just that I don't think that either of them, they're science fiction. I don't think that they're post-apocalyptic at all.
Post-apocalyptic is science fiction.
No, I know it's a branch of science.
Sci-fi.
But I don't think that in this instance, those two things have a connecting point, because everything about post-apocalyptica is that you live in it and you survive in it, and the story is the stuff. But in the time machine, the time traveler doesn't do that. He visits and he can leave again.
That's what I'm trying to say. I think he never really got there. I think he wanted to get there, and in War of the Worlds, he made an apocalypse happen. So an event happened that I don't know how familiar you are with War of the Worlds. Did enough damage to the global centers of the world that the aftermath must have been fucking awful, right? It must have been. It changed the entire world. The aliens were wiping out everything until they got a bit unwell, and yeah. So, and then he stopped writing it, and he should have written a sequel, the War of the Worlds 2, or whatever. I now really I want to think of a really good title for the follow-up to War. What's a good title for the follow-up to War of the Worlds? No,
The Ruined World.
That would work.
Remains of the World.
But I don't think he. I think he wanted to get there.
Martians have fucked it up for us. So carry on.
That sounds like it should go on a banner.
I like that one.
That you carry around in the street.
It's better than The End Is Nigh.
Yeah.
True. But yeah, I think he tried to get there but never did. But I like the idea that I think that probably inspired quite a lot of people to write. I mean, I would have taken that away and gone like, "What the fuck happened next?" And there's quite a lot of stories I think that reflect that. There's a lot of stories that start, as we discussed in the pod that we did at Fantasy Forest, that start with like the short brief at the start, going, "The world has finished and terrible things happened, but we're not going to go into that. We're just going to show you what happened afterwards." I think like you could probably weld a lot of those stories onto the end of War of the Worlds. Yeah,
I think War of the Worlds it's an invasion, and I guess it's also got elements of plague about it. That the aliens, the Martians, are the plague, and they're taking apart society in the same way that a disease takes apart society. So I can see that. I can see the sort of analogies there, but I think I would agree with Holly that it's not really an apocalyptic or a post-apocalyptic. Certainly,
it's not. That's the point I'm making. It's I think that book is an apocalypse book. It tells the story of the apocalypse, but and it stops, and it wants. I really wish he could have written something more about how he saw the world rebuilding it afterwards, because
so close.
Then he went on to fucking try it out, didn't he? And actually terrify the shit out of America.
The radio show.
Yeah, to see if they would actually go for and make an apocalypse happen in America.
That was Orson Welles, not H.G. Wells.
Oh yes, I know, but he didn't do it personally, of course.
No
it was
relation,
a legacy.
as far as I'm aware.
It was a legacy. Go on, Holly. You're about to say something.
Do you think? No, it's more of a question actually, because it comes from what you've just said about like how many books have that, and movies and different things kind of within this genre have the world is fucked and it has been fucked by these things, that this is what has made the world fucked. Now enter the story. Do you think that's important? Do you think it's important knowing how the world ended in a post-apocalyptic setting?
It depends how they tell the story. So we talked a lot last time about the film whose name I'm going to now forget. Vesper, right?
Okay, yeah.
So Vesper sets the scene really nicely by just having a little cue at the start going, "Oh, bio stuff," and then immediately the way the cinematography works, everything about the film works points at like plant life has been fucked up. You don't live in a citadel. You're gonna have a hard time living here. And you're like, okay. And then you get the idea that civilization is broken down because she lives on her own, and there's like a village full of people that are nearby, and those people live in a very hard way to make sure they get food, right? But then the story is about her looking after her disabled father, who was disabled during the war. That's kind of what the story's about. And the backdrop to that kind of is why that happened, why you got to that point, isn't that important to me. It's just how she survived, you know?
I'm not going to sideline us onto another, but it's just made me think of two things.
You can absolutely. It's how we work.
Oh, okay. Well, one is Horizon Zero Dawn, the computer game, is virtually the entirety of the game is you trying to figure out what happened, how the apocalypse came about, because it is a post-apocalyptic game, and it's the whole game is that unraveling of that story and that discovery, and it's beautifully done. But the other thing it made me think of was probably the first post-apocalyptic film I ever saw, which you didn't realise was a post-apocalyptic film until literally the last scene, and that's Planet of the Apes. Because that...
You don't need to spoil Planet of the Apes for everyone.
Everyone's seen Planet of the Apes.
Yeah, everybody's seen it. And that the Charlton Heston original is what I'm talking about. And that last scene of him on the beach and the ruined Statue of Liberty, and that is possibly the most iconic post-apocalyptic image in cinema history. But you don't realise that it's actually a post-apocalyptic film until that moment. And I think that's brilliant. So what you're saying about the discovery of how the apocalypse came about, I think is really kind of a strong story hook for all of the most successful stories, I think. I think it is important how it came about, but I don't think it has to be told up front.
No, I think it depends what kind of story you want to tell. I mean, sometimes it is just literally set dressing. You know, like in Vesper, it's just set dressing. Really, we point heavily in the last part. You know, it's great that they don't actually show the citadels or that kind of stuff. It just focuses on what's happening here. But you're right, though. Like the concept of why it happens, and indeed in an apocalypse movie, what happens next. So you know, that crossover of what happened here is quite cool when you're trying to work out what happened here. But equally, when you watch an apocalypse movie like War of the Worlds, or at least for me, I want to know what happens next. You know, I that translated more when I watched the 1950s film, or 1960s film War of the Worlds, which is nothing. It's nothing like the books. It's set in that time period. Yeah, so it's set in that time period. But I still want to know what happened next. You know, when it finished, I was like, oh. Did they go on to build? How did society collapse? Because it's a question that a 6-year-old needs to know the answers to. Did society collapse?
Well, I mean, you know, in terms of Hollywood, it's a sequel waiting to happen, isn't it?
Yeah, maybe now that when people hear this pod, they'll make a film.
We are influencers after all.
And Mark could do the props.
Yeah. Why not?
The costumes.
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah.
Mark will need lots of money, rich Hollywood producers.
Yeah. And I'll star in it for only millions of pounds.
People.
I'll just watch it afterwards.
You could write it.
There we are. Let's just produce it ourselves. We've got all the skills necessary. Kit, our producer, has just popped up with a look of abject terror on their face.
Which is excellent. That's what a post-apocalyptic movie should engender.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we're moving the way that we're moving, and I like it. I like what we're talking about. And the War of the Worlds thing, I thought we might go in a different direction, but we've taken it in a quite nice direction. I quite like it. But we'll step back towards literature a little bit because this pod was designed to talk about literature. But I'm glad it's inspired some other conversations. And Mark, you wanted to discuss your favourite books that inspired your love for.
Well, I would say my favourite post-apocalyptic novel or novella is actually debatable as to whether it's post-apocalyptic at all.
Well, that's ruined everything.
I know, it's great, isn't it?
I still want to hear about it because it's a book.
It's Roadside Picnic by Boris and Arkady Strugatsky. And if
I recognise that name.
That surname? Yeah, if anybody's LARPed with me on a post-apocalyptic LARP, they'll recognise that name because that's my character name, Strugatsky. Russian brothers.
Why is your character Welsh?
You don't even go there. Published in 1972, and the reason it's debatable as to whether it's post-apocalyptic is because the entire world has not collapsed, but there are these pockets, 6 pockets of apocalyptic environment which have appeared across the world, and they're called zones. And these zones are caused by visitation from aliens. And the reason it's called Roadside Picnic is because the premise is that aliens, as if humans were ants, and a bunch of humans had just pulled up at a roadside, had a picnic, left their debris there, and then driven off. And what is left in these zones is alien debris. But to humans, it's as inconceivable what these things are as it would be an ant finding a milk bottle or a straw or something. That it's just beyond human comprehension. Outside those zones, life continues, as normal. The world is not ended. But inside these zones are really an apocalyptic environment. And the novella has really created a number of tropes, such as stalkers, which is the name of the people who brave to go into these zones to recover these artifacts to bring out into the outside world. So there's Roadside Picnic is very much has been adopted, I think, by the post-apocalyptic genre community, but it's very debatable as to whether it's truly post-apocalyptic. But it's something which has certainly influenced Stalkers, as what the people who go in, and Stalkers is something which has been sort of adopted into post-apocalyptic games and loads of stuff. The other one is Metro 2033, which is another Russian novel where the world has been basically destroyed and pockets of humanity are left within the Moscow underground, surviving the mutants and everything above ground. So 2 really strong novels, both Russian, which I guess is kind of interesting. Those were my 2 first books that I read, I think, which really went, ooh, I love the apocalypse. And they're both Russian.
Can I just, before you get into that, Holly, I just want to add to Mark's statement there. I just looked it up online, just seeing if there was subgenres of post-apocalyptic, and my favourite quote that I found is the post-apocalyptic is not so much a subgenre, but more a kind of premise for what the story will unfold. Therefore, this premise can be comfortably embedded in all well-known speculative fiction subgenres such as autofuturism, alternate history, medieval futurism, and there's a big list of why post-apocalyptic nature can be found in almost any sort of story you're telling.
Yeah,
sorry, can't
that. I mean, that's actually really fascinating, because I suppose when you consider it, any world and any setting, any physical setting has the potential for apocalyptic events to occur. It just, the nature of those events is going to be different depending on, so like the entire world could be wiped out by like big bad sorcerer's spell. Lord of the Rings has the potential to be an apocalyptic, has the potential to have apocalyptic events in it, right? Like, but
you could say after the first coming of Sauron, they're living in a certain,
in a which kind of leads, I think, to then the idea of if anything could technically be, every piece of literature and every film that has ever actually been produced is kind of pre-apocalyptica in a way. Some of them obviously aren't ever going to turn into like apocalyptic novels or have I'll have apocalyptic events in them, but anything technically could be.
Noddy Goes to War was one.
No, because
Is it arguable that Avengers Endgame is post-apocalyptic because half the population of the world has been blinked out of existence?
potentially.
I mean, obviously as well, the nature of post-apocalypse depends on the level of the society. I mean, like if you're quite primitive or even medieval, and you lose a couple of bits of your society, you're kind of fucked, and you've got to like live in a world that no longer functions anymore. You know,
Well,
if it happened really quickly.
if by that didn't,
But
Hitchhike
the planet could be largely okay.
but by that reckoning, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is a post-apocalyptic novel.
Yeah,
Because
but he's not living in that
but
environment,
he's
as
not.
we
Well,
established.
no, but he can't live in that environment because that
No.
environment is gone. So
Demolished to make way for a hyperspace bypass.
absolutely, but you know, like, and that as well, that deals very, very, very well from if you look at The Last Man and you look at Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and you look at the parallel there of like that idea of lastness and that idea of, you know, there's a way of dealing with it with, you know, like the ideas of bitterness and upset and melancholy that kind of really embodied the 1820s. And then there's Douglas Adams and his incredible comedic way of writing that puts that huge amounts of kind of like sarcastic fun into being the last human in existence, to the point where you actually don't realize that could potentially be traumatic. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, you're right though. I mean, it's everywhere in most forms of literature. Mark and I were talking about the concept of Doctor Who and the Daleks. You know, being when we were at Fantasy Forest, being the big end of the world. Daleks, Skaro's been destroyed. The thousand of Daleks are living in a post-apocalyptic environment, right? So the Doctor Who and the Daleks is a post-apocalyptic section of Doctor Who, and I looked up earlier, and I've got it on my screen over here. Examples of post-apocalyptic in Doctor Who, and it's got 10th Planet, The Web of Fear, The Invasion, Spearhead from Space, Terror of the Autons, Army of Ghosts, Doomsday, The Sound of Drums. Last time was as a small number of examples. Yes.
So, The Sound of Drums.
Yeah.
I made.
Sorry.
I made post-apocalyptic pieces of costume for that episode. For the future kind. Yeah, there were these big harnesses made out of bits of old motorcycle gear and stuff like that, and they were possibly the first pieces of post-apocalyptic kit I ever made. And sadly, they didn't make it into the episode because they were too big to go through the doorways. I didn't design them; I just made them to the designs. But yeah, they were all raised up, and they were too big to go through the doors. Bugger. Anyway, carry on.
Did you keep them? Did you steal them?
No, but apparently they did end up as a bit of set dressing on the 50th anniversary episode, I was later told.
Oh, yeah. There you go, gentle listeners. But yeah, so like loads of Doctor Who, there is a massive list of how the writers of Doctor Who just kept destroying worlds, you know, and having people living in the aftermath as a staple of their storytelling, which is not surprising if you're writing a sci-fi show, really, and you've got to do episodic things for like 60 years. I suppose. I mean, you're going to touch on post-apocalyptica quite frequently.
You just have to think of like the amount of apocalypses that like Janeway left behind her in Voyager, or like, you know, like
everywhere.
She really fucked with the Prime Directive, didn't she?
Really, really did. Yeah, on a number of levels. Still really cool though. Still my favourite Star Trek.
Triffids. That was my first book I read that was post-apocalyptic.
Yep, excellent.
Really good, excellent. I mean, I don't need to really go through it, really. It was just really inspiring for me to read. I think I went on to read, it's John Wyndham, isn't it? So I went on to read The Seeds of Time after that, which wasn't as good. I still enjoyed it, but it wasn't as good.
There was a sequel written to Day of the Triffids by some author many, many years later, but it was very disappointing.
I really hate it when that happens. It annoys me so much. I don't know why people do it. Like, I know I really don't, because there's things like the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo series, right? Oh, yeah. 3 books, brilliant. End of those 3 books, done. Author dead, right? Like, it kind of rounds that off quite nicely, you know. He's written a trilogy. he's passed away, that's the end of that. But no, someone else is like, I'm just going to pick this up and just carry on now. And it's terrible. It's absolutely awful.
The same thing happened with The Hitchhiker's Guide as well. A truly, truly awful sequel. Sorry, whoever you were that wrote it, but you are not Douglas Adams.
Mark does not approve.
Truly awful. But yeah, I totally agree with you. Leave it be.
Leave it alone. Please, just leave it alone. Like, nobody can replicate the tone of voice of somebody that has written, like, you have to be an exceptional ghostwriter to be able to do that. And I don't think that there are actually a lot of people that possess that skill in the required way.
Imagine somebody trying to write more Discworld novels. No, it would be absolutely horrendous, wouldn't it?
It would be awful. It would be genuinely. It would actually. I think the thing is that books that do it actually damages the legacy of the author. Like, and
only if you're stupid enough to go and read them.
Well, you have to read them. They're books because they're
books. There's a morbid fascination to see. It might be good. No, it's truly awful.
You kind of want to see if it's okay. It's the reason there's someone has written so in Wuthering Heights, which is one of my favorite books of all time, there is a gap in Wuthering Heights where Heathcliff disappears for years and years. And
I knew this
the premise of this book is that you are not supposed to know what Heathcliff did. He went away poor and he came back rich. That's all you need to know. Right? Somebody has written a book that fills in that gap. And I really want
to read it?
I haven't read it. I want to read it because I want to know, but I want to know what they think. But I also, at the same time, know that it will destroy Wuthering Heights for me.
He went to Norway and made gonks.
Excellent.
It was sold for loads.
Good. Happy now.
My biggest annoyance on that whole thing of let's fill in some gaps rather than leave it a mystery is the Alien franchise when they went and did fucking Prometheus. And I was like, you just didn't need to know that. Sorry, I'm about to rage quit, but it just pissed me off so much. Anyway, that's enough.
Mark, you managed to bring it round to vaguely post-apocalyptic again. I was stuck in the 1800s. I was stuck in romance literature.
We both have the things that we love, Holly.
Very strong feelings about that as a whole.
Yeah. Anyway, any authors out there thinking of doing anything like that, fucking stop it right now, all right?
Unless you're an exceptional ghostwriter.
Steve and I...
No, not even then. Just fucking don't do it.
We wanted to go there and write a prequel for the Fallout games badly. Because Mark loves those. Ruin them for us.
You made Mark growl.
Not in a good way.
So I think we've probably used up our time now.
Have we? Oh well.
It's fine.
Can we come back again and do this?
As we've said so many times before, we are liable to go off at tangents. And as I began this entire pod by saying, we have chosen to pluck our thoughts from the bush of random ideas like unripened straw. Gooseberries. It was gooseberries. And I think we may have made a disgusting dessert from them.
Hey, from my perspective, it tastes really nice, actually.
There you go. But it tastes good, and that's all that matters.
Never use hairy fruit for a pie.
So, yeah, I think... So we came here to talk about post-apocalyptica, right? I don't... I'll wait.
Sorry, Harry. Is that our episode title?
Unfortunately, I missed that because I was actually doing the script.
Mark just turned around and went, never use hairy fruit for a pie.
It's good advice. Mark's not even redder than usual.
I look like I'm wearing terrible fake tan.
Do not edit this out. Just leave it in. Or maybe do edit it out. So we came here to talk about the post-apocalyptic genre. But I wanted it to be kind of more rounded and more about everything that falls, as we said, into that Venn diagram of science fiction nonsense. And I think with some exceptions, such as Heathcliff and anger at aliens, we've kind of successfully navigated some of the what we wanted to talk about. It was really good to see us kind of go into War of the Worlds, going, this is just an apocalyptic film. We're going, yeah, what it is, and then us talking about how post-apocalyptic films are framed using kind of referenced apocalypses, and whether that's a good or a bad thing. I like that. We want to talk some more about like computer games and videos and other stuff, but I think we're just going to carry on as we are, just nonsensically rambling through the concepts that fall out of our noggins.
We've
very succinctly put there.
We've made some very clever links, I think, between things.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've done a good job.
Yep.
Well, I'm more than happy to carry on talking about the post-apocalypse. Little bit fond of it.
I think we can squeeze another episode out of it at the very least. So that is us, beautiful people. We'll continue our journey, as we say, through the terrible environments of post-apocalyptica, drinking from radiation-filled waterfalls, and scavenging for elastic bands out of, I don't know, used milkmen. That's where I'm going with that. Used milkman elastic bands.
Okay. Yes.
I think Postman would have been better now I think about it.
They do. They have much more acts.
Goodbye from me!
The Postman is an apocalyptic film.
Who does he deliver to?
He finds a big sack of mail and decides that he's going to just deliver it.
Okay, so I do apologise. The heat is what I will blame for this. But yeah. I think we'll try it again. So that is us, beautiful people. We will continue our journey through the post-apocalyptic environment, drinking from radiation-filled pools, and wrestling Postman, which is a post-apocalyptic film for elastic bands that we can use to keep our notes together. We hope you've enjoyed our thoughts and ramblings. It's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me.
And it's still goodbye from me.
The power of the phrase goodbye. Have an amazing week, everyone. We love you very much.
Bye.
You have been listening to A Geek Tragedy with me, Plague Mantle, and my best friend, the excellent Holly Properly, and our actually famous guy, Mark Caldery. If you like this, there is plenty more at patreon.com/A Geek Tragedy. Production is by Kit Britnell. Our logo and artwork is by markcaldery.com. Music is by Borislaw Kozielski. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at A Geek Tragedy. Email us at geektragedypodcast@gmail.com. Subscribe, leave us a rating and a review. And don't forget to tell all your geeky friends. Also, a big shout out to all of our genius geeks. We adore each and every one of you. And of course, much love. Take care of each other.